Hello students, this is Miss Thornbrew. Welcome to part 1 of description, narration, and dialogue. I'm just holding my little phone over the paper, so it's going to be a little jumpy. Anyway, here we go. So, in fiction, if you take a look at any sentence at all, it's either going to be one of these three things on this paper: description, narration, or dialogue. Description, narration, or dialogue. With description, you are simply describing what's going on: weather, appearance, clothing, emotion, scenery, as in the following example. It was a gorgeous summer day, complete with the fresh smell of new-mown grass and the sound of birds chirping merrily. Free to spend the afternoon as she wished, Arabella would have been perfectly happy if it were not that her nose had now grown exceedingly large. In other respects, Arabella was quite a pretty little girl, with dazzling blue eyes and a cheerful smile. Her new nose, however, was hideously mutated. It had purple discolorations and etc., etc. Now, I want to ask you a question. What color's her hair? What's she wearing? Did you have her as blonde? Did you have her in a dress, pink or blue? Did you have her in overalls with dark raven-colored hair? Is she on by a castle, by a stream, by a forest? You see, here's the thing. You can never, ever describe anything enough that you can get every single detail as you pictured in your head. You pick and choose a few of the details, you write them down, and let the reader fill in the blanks. You didn't have any problem getting a picture of this little girl, did you? Her nose, her hair. Your brain did that, and it's pretty magical, okay? So don't be alarmed about the fact you can never describe things in complete detail. You simply put a few in there and give the reader the opportunity to fill in the blanks. That's kind of why we have such a hard time with movie versions sometimes, because it's not the way we pictured it, and yet they read the same book, right? Okay, narration. With narration, I want you to notice this. Sorry, cell phone awkwardness. With narration, here, write this down. This is important. How am I going to do this? All right. With narration, nowadays, most of our fiction is written in third person. Yeah, you should write that down somewhere. And it's written in the past tense. Makes sense. Something like, he strode across the room, he saw the love of his life, he went towards her, the two of them held each other, and they locked eyes, and then finally they kissed. Now, it turns out that we're starting to get a little more experimental. I'm sure you've read things in the first person. I moved across the room, I saw the love of my life, I moved into his arms, that kind of thing. And then weirdly enough, in the sphere of romance in particular, they're starting to do a little bit of work with present tense. That would be something like, I see my love across the room, I move towards him, he pulls me tight, we lock eyes, and then we kiss. Oh, I know, very, very cheesy, but it's true, okay? So be aware that we have first person as an option, we have present tense as an option, although they are still not very common. Very uncommon to have second person, although in something like a vignette style or a poem, to add in the you. We just don't see that a lot in storytelling. So, mostly third person past tense. In this particular case, we have the following story. In desperation, Arabella finally decided to consult the king of all the land. Decided. She tidied her room and packed a small bag, not forgetting, there's a nice verb, to include her wooden toy horse and a sizable collection of string. She nipped a hunk of bread and cheese when Cook wasn't looking, and scampered out of the door, only to fall flat on her face because, as usual, she'd forgotten to tie her shoes. Oops, silly girl. Okay, all of those past tense verb act like as if it were on a timeline. First this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and finally that happened. Okay? And again, normally past tense verbs. Now, just FYI, you don't need to write this down, but it turns out that there are a lot of languages that actually make a distinction in verb tense between description and narration. All of you French and Spanish learners out there, when you describe things in storytelling, you're telling a story in the past tense, you're going to put the description into, let's see, in Spanish they call it the imperfecto, and in French they call it the imparfait. Okay, don't write that down unless you're a French or Spanish learner. And then when it shifts to narration and it's your storytelling, one thing happens after another, you're going to do it in, let's see, Spanish calls it the pretérito, and French calls it the passé composé. Okay, all those of you who are learning those particular languages, did you realize that that's what they're doing? When they tell stories in the past, they make a distinction and actually have different verb endings for their descriptive type of language and their narrative type of languages. Ooh, ah. Finally, the third strand is dialogue. One thing I want you to notice right away is, oh my gosh, we have a lot of paragraphs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because every time you switch speakers, you switch paragraphs. Excuse me, Mr. Frog, said Arabella. Would you kindly show me the way to the castle? That's all she says. 2 little lines, paragraph. Now the frog's going to answer, and we switch paragraphs. You blithering idiot, said the creature. I'm quite obviously a toad, not a frog. Okay, now we know who's talking. It's a conversation between 2 beings. We can drop the he said, she said kind of thing because we've already established that pattern. So now she can just say, oh, well, whatever. Could you show me the right direction? And we know who's talking. No he said, she said. Notice how short of a paragraph that is? When she's done, new paragraph. The right direction is straight back to elementary school, ignorant girl. You could use some serious remedial help in animal identification. Frog indeed. I'm sorry to offend you, but I'm not going back to school. All I did there was sit in the principal's office all day long and dream up ways to put a curse on Florian Higginbottom. Curses, eh? You ever try Wordicus, Blordicus, Hicksex von Strudel? That's a nice one for uncontrollable acne. Now, what you do when you write good fiction, or what they do nowadays, is to take all 3 of these strands. Ooh, let's see them all. Whoa, there it is. Description, narration, and dialogue. And you weave them together. You put a little bit of description, a little bit of narration, a little bit of dialogue, then maybe a little narration, then a little description, then a little dialogue, and back and forth, without spending too much time in each one of the strands. Okay, and that makes for compelling, nice storytelling type fiction. Okay, end of part 1, done.